Oops. All right. Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, or whenever you're reading this. Again, my name is Mr. Arndt, and I will be going through this week's lesson, which obviously lecture number 5, Inductive Bible Study. Actually, that's wrong. I think we're on lecture number 7. So, as always, I got my coffee. I hope you have yours too. Okay, so a lot of what we've been going through has been kind of leading up to this. We've talked about tools. We've talked about different interpretations. We've talked about a whole wide range of things which can be used in a inductive Bible study. So, long story short, this is what we've been building towards. Okay, so our agenda today. In case you were curious, everything in this lecture that I'll be talking about will be coming from your workbook, section 8. In this lecture, we're going to be going through the following. What you need to do is make sure you listen to this presentation. You can have a copy of the slides that I email you, handy dandy. You can make notes as we go through them. You can click on, let me make sure I have, where's my pointer? There we go. Click on this handy dandy link right here. This is a great video that'll go over some further tools that go hand in hand with inductive Bible studies. So make sure you go through that. It's only about 10 minutes long, so it's a great video, short and sweet, and it'll help you in the long run with future assignments. And then lastly, make sure you download and complete the homework assignment that I email out to you today. Today is Friday. What day is it today? The 1st, May 1st. So, again, that'll be due a week from now, so next Friday. Okay. Week. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to recap a little bit on some of the things that we've covered. It's probably been about 4 weeks now, maybe 5 weeks ago. We went through one of the primary tools used in any kind of logical reasoning, which is inductive and deductive. Inductive reasoning, if you remember, is more Aristotle in nature, whereas deductive is more along the lines of Sherlock Holmes. I think I got that right. Anyway, so inductive reasoning is where, well, let me go through these. Inductive reasoning is logically true, right? So everything that you're saying sounds like it makes sense, sounds like it could be true. But realistically, it could or could not be true. It may or may not be true. So you're taking a specific argument and you're drawing a general conclusion. You're taking a small snippet of something and you're applying it to something bigger in life. And so this will be what we're using with our Bible study for this week. And we'll go through some of the strengths and some of the weaknesses associated with that. Deductive reasoning is where it must be logically true and it must be realistically true. So you're taking a general idea and you're creating specific conclusions about it. So we'll get a little bit more into the details on that, but make sure you understand the differences between these two. Okay, so inductive reasoning. That's my phone going off. Okay, inductive reasoning. I made this myself. The Avengers is a group of vigilante heroes. Okay, so that's a broad statement. Captain America has superpowers. The Hulk has superpowers. Therefore, all members of the Avengers must have superpowers. Okay? So you're taking a broad idea, you're taking general concepts that sound logical, sound true, and you're making a conclusion from those things, right? However, as we all know, Hawkeye has no superpowers. He's just a guy with a bow and arrow. Okay. Deductive reasoning. So, if you can, and make sure you talk to your parents beforehand, I highly encourage you finding a YouTube clip from Monty Python's, oh gosh, what is it called now? Monty Python and the Holy Grail. There's a scene in there where the villagers believe that they have found a woman who is a witch. So this is basically the flow of their argument, right? And you're taking specifics and making a general claim from it, right? What do you do with witches? You burn them. Why do they burn? Because they're made of wood. Wood floats in water. What else floats in water? A duck. Therefore, if she weighs the same as a duck, then she must be a witch. Okay, so the thing with deductive reasoning is that it is only as good as the information that you feed into it. Okay, so this is where we start getting into a lot of fallacies, and this would be a classic example of a fallacy, right? You're taking concepts and you are arranging them in logical order and fashion. Everything in this argument is logical. However, the information inside of them is not true, making it not valid. It is an invalid argument. So that's sort of the strengths and weaknesses behind inductive and deductive reasoning, is that really it comes down to they're only as good as the information that you plug into the arguments. Okay. All right. Inductive Bible studies. So with inductive studies, the goal is to understand specifics of Scripture and create a general understanding, right? So you're taking a small snippet of Scripture in order to have a greater understanding of what the author's trying to say. So for instance, if we go to Exodus and we see the 10 Commandments and it says, do not murder, that's a small snippet. And from that, we can generally say that murder is bad. All right. So there's 3 steps that your book is going to outline for an inductive Bible study. First is observation. What does the text actually say? Second is interpretation. What does the text actually mean? And third is application, in that what does the text mean to me? And most importantly, how can I apply it to my life? Right? And so we read in James when he says things like faith without works is dead. That's kind of alluding to this snippet right here of, if we see it and if we understand it, but we miss out on the third principle of applying it, then the first 2 really have no merit. You've wasted your time. Really, if you miss any one of these 3, you're going to be way off course, right? If you observe something that wasn't quite right, if you interpret that something not quite right, it's going to have adverse effects between the 3 of these things. So let's go into the next one. Observation. So these are the primary aspects of observation. Okay, we have context, what's happening before, what's happening after the passage. We have genre. What kind of writing is being used? Is it a letter? Is the tone happy, angry, sad? What exactly would you call this kind of literature? Continuity. What are some of the repeated themes that you see throughout the chapter, throughout the book, throughout the general timeline? What is the author trying to emphasize? Proportion. Is there space for other topics? Is there, is the majority of the chapter focused on this central theme? Or is the chapter geared towards covering a wide variety? So that might be something along the lines of Galatians when he talks about the fruits of the Spirit. Structural. How does he contrast some of the themes, some of the things that he emphasizes? Grammatical. where is he placing most of the weight, right? And the figures of speech that are being used. So this is a really important one to understand. Is he using sarcasm? Is he being literal? Is he using a parable? Those are things to consider. So we'll go into the first example through each of these functions of observation. All right, so Philippians 4:13. This is also in your workbook, so if you want to follow along in your workbook, this is where I've taken it from. Philippians 4:13, of course, is one of the most popular verses that we find today. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. But what's important is how we understand this passage, right? What is the author saying? What does he mean? What were his circumstances when he wrote these things? And how can we apply those things to our life today? So, first thing, context. When Paul wrote this passage, when he wrote this letter to the Philippians, Paul was actually in prison at the time. He was chained, probably sleeping on a dirt floor, constantly had guards, and he probably knew that he was going to be executed, right? He was not in a position where most people would be excited. He was in a pretty relatively bad place to the world standard, right? Genre. This is a letter that he wrote to a church that he actually founded in Philippi. He wrote the letter in order to strengthen them through the hardships that they were either facing or the hardships that were definitely coming down the road. So this was a letter to lift them up and to prepare them for things to come. So what's the continuity that we see here? The main things that we see is that he's concerned, he's content, and that he has learned, right? This is something that he has learned through experience, through time, through his own observations. Proportion. Chapter 4 of Philippians is actually devoted to greeting, to thanking, and to... You'll see this in the next couple slides, but he always brings everything back to through Christ. I can do all things through Christ. So he just says that a number of times throughout the chapter, that everything is through Christ. All right. Structural. Paul uses contrasts to strengthen contentment. So this is a style of writing where, again, he says, I can do all things, ... through Christ. I can do these things through Christ. So that's definitely a style that he uses to emphasize that it's actually through Christ that he does all things. Grammatical, I can, through him. Figures of speech, everything, right? It's important to understand what he means by everything. I don't think he meant that, that you can jump off rooftops and be A-okay, or get bit by a snake and be hunky-dory. I think what he means by this is that whatever comes to him from the outside world, whatever comes to him through the exterior, he is able to handle them through Christ. So even if he gets thrown in prison, he is content. Even if he is suffering, he is in content. And it's not just suffering, it's also when he's blessed with a warm bed or a meal. It doesn't matter if he has or he has not. He's content in these things. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the video because we're coming up on 15 minutes. And don't forget to click on part 2.